All right. Well, welcome everyone. Hello, and welcome to this week's MetPro Meetup. My name is Tom, and today our guest is Angelo Poli. He'll be sharing some information, which I'm really looking forward to. I love the title of what he'll be talking about today, Crash Diet, a slippery slope and up adjusting, the key to long-term results. I love the title, and I'm thrilled Angelo is going to be sharing with us today about fitness and nutrition. Fundamentally, though, I know Angelo said he wanted to spend the bulk of the time in Q&A from all of you. So we do have the chat open. So if you have any questions you want to ask, just type those in there. We've already got questions coming in that I've received. So really looking forward to Angelo fielding those. If you haven't met Angelo, I do have to give him a little bit of an introduction. He's an internationally recognized expert in fitness and nutrition. He's the co-founder of MetPro. He devised the process called Metabolic Profiling to analyze someone's metabolism and provide an individualized approach to obtaining health goals. In his 20 years of educating people about wellness, fitness, weight loss, he is passionate about the science of body transformation. It comes through in everything he says. He's had the privilege of working with Olympic athletes, professional athletes, MVPs, NFL players, physique models, you name it, he's done it, and ordinary people like me. Clients have consistently achieved their results using MetPro, and whether they've got stubborn injuries or a difficult metabolism. So enough about Angelo. He'll get embarrassed if I talk too much about him, and I know he wants to hear mostly from everybody here who's joined. So if you do have any questions, just pop those in there. We also have the raise hand feature here in Zoom. So if you do have anything that you want to ask there, you can do that. Or, if you've got your camera on, you can raise your hand. I'll try to look at all the different screens and make sure we get any questions answered there. So with that being said, Angelo, I'm going to turn that over to you. Take it away.
Hey guys, so good to see everyone here today. I am honored that you all showed up. We're going to get to visit a little. I cringe every time Tom introduces me. Even though I love his introductions, I always think to myself, well, it's nice you all showed up to learn from someone who has all the answers. And while we wait for him to show up, I'll visit with you guys. That's what I'm thinking to myself the whole time, because I am always just learning and I don't have all the answers. But what I have learned in my few years of experience, I love sharing. And so please feel free to ask any questions as we dive in and we chat today. I mean that. That's really what I'm passionate about. I got into this whole gig, this whole shtick, because I feel like there's a lot of innovation to be had in this particular industry. I've had the privilege of getting to walk with people as they've transformed their lives, their health, their body. And it's a lot of persistent beliefs or ideas that float around that in of themselves are not necessarily wrong or bad. But I feel like there's kind of this layer of practicality that gets missed. Sometimes people just want the answer to a question and they want the real answer, a practical answer. And it's kind of shrouded in either marketing or statistics or, what's really the simple truth when it comes to our health, our physique, our metabolism, our body. And that's what I'd like to get to visit with you guys about a little bit today. So I want to talk about, I think I wrote it down here. Tom said it, crash diets, a slippery slope, up adjusting, the key to long-term results. But I think in some of the questions that we already got sent in, a lot of this stuff is going to get covered. So if it's all right with you guys, Tom, do you mind pitching me one of the questions? I know Erica had phenomenal questions. I want to answer some of your questions today, and several others as well. So do you mind pitching me from the top, Tom?
You got it, Angelo. Let me pass that on to you. So great questions that were raised. So let's just do this one, and this is really pertaining to our concierge coaching, right? Is how do coaches develop individual eating or exercise plans for each person, despite never actually having met or tested that person? right? Because we're working with people all across the country, our coaches across the country. What's that process like?
We meet you, and then we baseline test you. And those are two intricate, or rather intrinsic pieces to the equation. Actually, that's been a long-standing pet peeve of mine in the fitness industry in particular. It's not as prevalent in the medical, but in the fitness industry. A lot of times trainers or fitness enthusiasts will suppose to know what you need to eat before they've met you. And it doesn't work that way. Fundamentally, the industry says, if you're a moderately active 200-pound male, here's what you need to eat to lose weight. Well, like I said, I'm interested in the practical answer. My experience has been the fact that you're moderately active, 200 pounds, or male does not dictate what it's going to take to gain or lose weight. What we have to do is we have to look at you as a person and see how your body is actually responding. So the first thing that we do is we get to know the person. We want to kind of know their history. Probably, and again, just trying to bottom line it, probably the most relevant piece of information when determining what's going to trigger weight gain or weight loss for an individual is what their body is used to. And I know this may sound shocking, but that's even more relevant than your age, weight, gender. Really, when I started doing this 20 years ago, I was giving seminars, and I would divide the room, and I needed to come up with quicker ways to help talk to, part of the room. Okay, what's probably going to work for you guys is this. What's probably going to work for this part of the room is this. And so what I do is I would have them fill out a little questionnaire with all the typical questions that you see on these intake forms: age, height, weight, gender, etc. What I found is that was pretty useless. You know what ended up actually telling me where someone was at? So I wanted to know what they were currently doing, what their body was used to eating, if they had already lost weight and were plateaued, or if they were just starting. Those two elements were going to give me a good indication of what would likely work for a person. And so that ended up being the early foundation of what evolved into metabolic profiling. So when somebody starts with us, after we get to know you, your background, we call it your fitness culture or your history, then we are going to start you on a baseline testing meal plan. And there's nothing special about this meal plan. It is crafted with a lot of love and care and effort that has gone into it. But really, what's special about it is we know what you're eating. We know the calories, we know the macronutrient ratios, the glycemic load, the frequency, the breakdown. We know everything about what you're eating. What's more than that is I know how several thousand people of similar demographic and circumstance have responded based on that baseline testing meal. Woman in her 30s, has a few pounds to lose, moderately active. Here's a starting meal plan. Again, there's nothing special about that meal plan, and some people will gain weight with it. Some people will lose weight with it. Some people will stay the exact same weight with it. But what happens is if you're willing to track using that baseline testing method, after a few days, a trend is going to emerge. I spent years doing this, and gone are the days where, as a sports nutritionist, the client comes to me and I write down, okay, here's the meal plan, and I give it to them and I say, okay, come meet with me in 6 weeks and we'll see how it goes. I mean, that's the way sports nutritionists worked for years. But now we'll send you home with a meal plan, and I'm going to say, okay, I want you to follow this for 72 hours. Now, a lot of people say, well, Angelo, 72 hours isn't long enough to really learn someone's metabolism inside and out. And that's true. But it is long enough to start getting an early indication, because it's unlikely that somebody's going to be non-responsive on a meal plan for 3 or 4 days and then suddenly lose 15, 20 pounds after that. It's also unlikely that somebody's going to lose 3 or 4 pounds in a matter of a day or just a few days, and then all of a sudden start gaining. So we get early indications of direction, and then that's what helps our coaches determine from here, this is what we're going to do next, this is what we're going to do next, this is what we're going to do next. So that's where getting to know you and then having you baseline test is the most relevant, because
Well,
there is no fake. Go ahead, Tom.
that ties in actually kind of to the second question. You dovetailed into that nicely, Angelo, which is one could say that the weight loss, that algorithm in this program is based on simple carb cycling. And how does MetPro use more than just this plan to ensure success? Did you have any further clarification on that? How we've been proven successful in this area?
Yeah, so we do use carb cycling. We do use calorie manipulation. So MetPro is not a diet. And I know it's easy to kind of confuse. MetPro stands for Metabolic Profiling. What that stands for is an evaluation system, a way of evaluating if what you're doing is working, not working, what pace your body's acclimating to it at. Because we're kind of nutritionally, we're nutritionally neutral. In other words, we don't have one bias. I don't put people on some special food formula or some shake or some bar or something like that. I'm looking to see how their body is responding to. And so what we're going to do is we're going to lean into whichever lever is producing the most effective result for that person at that time. And so that may be calorie manipulation. It may be carbohydrate manipulation, but then there's tentacles off of that. And we're going to look at the glycemic load. We're going to look at meal timing and frequency. And then we're also going to look at distance traveled. So what that means is somebody who has already lost a considerable amount of weight using one strategy, we may change their strategy and use a different scientific lever to elicit further weight loss, not because we believe in a different strategy more, or we think that there was something wrong with the first strategy, but because the way the body adapts is the best strategy is the one where you have the most leverage. So whatever your body isn't used to. So a lot of times I'll get the question where somebody will come to me and say, Angelo, I really did well on a low carb diet. How come you've taken me off of low carb? And my answer is because low carb did work for you. The issue is we played that card. Your body is now used to that low carb. So we have to change something else, get your body out of that state of being used to it. So when we cycle back to it in the future, it will once again elicit a response. There's nothing more frustrating than realizing that not all diets work the same way for everyone. But then B, even more frustrating than that, is the same diet that has worked for you in the past, you can go back on in the future and not get the same response. How is that possible? Well, your metabolism is constantly changing. So taking maybe just one small offshoot from this topic, weight loss. And I'm just using weight loss. Not everybody's interested in that. Some people are wanting athletic performance. They're wanting to gain weight or build muscle. But I'm just using weight loss because that is probably the most typical thing somebody will reach out to us for. Weight loss is not a function of what you eat per se. It's not a function of when I eat this many calories or this many grams of carbs or this much fat, I lose X amount of weight. It doesn't work like that. When you adjust your diet to something that's different from what your body is used to, and that difference is creating a deficit, weight loss is the byproduct that takes place temporarily while your metabolism is recreating homeostasis. I know there's a lot of big words in there, but put simply, you lose weight during the time interval it takes your body to get used to the new diet again. Your body will always get used to any diet. It has to survive. If it didn't, you would die. In other words, if you decreased your intake and you started losing 2 pounds a week and you kept losing 2 pounds a week indefinitely, pretty soon you'd be in the hospital hooked up to an IV. That doesn't happen, right? What happens is your metabolism goes, okay, I'm getting used to this. And that's where your genetic predisposition comes in. Some people's body don't genetically get used to restrictions calorically, macronutrient wise, etc., very quickly, and they have no problem losing weight. Other people have a metabolism where you decrease and it just laughs at you and it says, okay, I get it, I'll lose weight for 2 days and then I'm good. And that's why we have to continue to adjust. There is no one diet. So coming back to MetPro isn't a diet, it's an evaluation system to know when something's working and when we need to adjust something.
And Angelo, on that, adjusting, you mentioned the levers, right? That we've got, and you were kind of focusing there on diet. How does exercise play into the whole strategy of, and maybe particularly for weight loss? I know that we have folks that are interested in different objectives, right? Whether it's maintenance or athletic performance, but for weight loss, how would you say that exercise plays into that?
Exercise is critical. So it's one of your 2 major levers. You have diet and you have exercise. So with everyone, if you're working with me as a client, you have to exercise. Now, what that exercise looks like is different for every person. For some people, just taking the dogs around the block, that's our starting step. That's our exercise. For other people, we're in boot camp and we're going to do some aggressive work. It just depends on what your entry level is. People like to quantify it. They like to say, well, it's 90% diet, 10% exercise, or it's 60% diet, 40% exercise, almost as if, the diet results in me losing 1 pound a week and the exercise results in me losing 4 ounces a week. But in practicality, it doesn't work that way. What happens is there has to be enough of a shift to what your body is used to trigger weight loss in the first place. And your levers are going to be diet, and now broad strokes here. They're going to be carbohydrate manipulation, calorie manipulation, and energy expenditure. So that's a gross oversimplification, but those are going to be the 3 grandfather levers that you have to pull from. So the first thing that I do with somebody when I just get to know a new client is I want a good goal setting session. I'm really into good goal setting sessions, but not for the reasons you'd think. A good goal setting session to me is all about deciding what you're not going to do right now. In other words, what are we going to focus on today that's going to be the most relevant? Because I know what you want. It's the same thing everybody wants. They've called me about over the last 2 decades. They want to lose weight. They want to perform better. They want to have more energy. They want to tone up, and they want more strength. Does that about cover it? We want all of those things. But if we try and accomplish all of them at once, unless you're just genetically predisposed to having a lot of success, generally speaking, what's going to get us the greatest result is going to be being a specialist, not a generalist, at least for a short time. We have to push hard enough in one direction. So it's like, what do we want to accomplish? Okay, our first stop is we've got to take 20 pounds off. That's our first goal. So knowing that, have we optimized our exercise for it? So I'm looking at volume, intensity, and modality. Broad strokes. There's 6 basic buckets exercise would fall into. And we won't dive too far into them, but I'll recite them. On the aerobic side, you have endurance training. Endurance training has the unique attribute of being the only significant style of fitness training that expends calories and energy without eliciting a strong hypertrophic response. In other words, it burns calories without building muscle. Then from there, you move into what we would call interval training. Some people know it as HIIT or high intensity interval training or varied intensity intervals. And a lot of fitness gurus really like this style of training because it enables you to maximize energy expenditure in a minimal amount of time. And studies have shown that you get an afterburn that's substantial after that, where your body's recovering from that high intensity interval. But it's still cardiovascular. You're not going to wake up with big giant muscles from it. There will be a mild hypertrophic muscle building response, but it's minimal. And then there's cardio circuit. So that would be any training routine that's cardiovascular at its core, but maybe has some plyometrics. So you think of boot camps or circuits. I remember back in the day, the big thing was curves for women, stations that you go through, which was basically a cardio station, a cardio station, a cardio station that would keep your heart rate up the whole time. And then there was 150 knockoffs from that. But that was all a style of expending energy in cardiovascular activity. Then you have three buckets on the hypertrophic side. You have your circuit training. So that's kind of your classic machines or bodybuilding exercises where you're just doing it at a quick tempo. You're moving from one to the next to the next. People like that because it's time efficient. I can go and build muscle while also burning some calories. Then there's cross training. CrossFit's the most popular type of cross training right now. But if you've been in this gig long enough, you've seen the trends. You know, there's cross training has been around long before Greg Glassman and Castro and any of those guys. I knew all the early guys with the CrossFit, and it's been a blast. But cross training has to be put into the hypertrophic category because even if it is a lot of endurance work, the fact that you stop and do heavy deadlifts in the middle of it means that it's going to elicit a strength response, a muscular response. And then you have the last type of exercise, which is pure strength training, powerlifting. It's your bodybuilders. They go to the gym and they do, 3 sets of 12 reps, or your power lifters doing their deadlift, their bench press, their squats. This is going to elicit a strong hypertrophic response. They're going to increase strength. Here's the important part. There's no right or wrong in this equation. There's no, this is the right exercise, that's the right exercise, this is the wrong. That doesn't exist. If somebody's telling you that's the case, they have an agenda. The key is to go into your exercise purposefully. So that way it harmonizes with your goal. Going back to that goal setting, if I'm going to build a meal plan progression for you that's to optimize fat burning, and then we have an exercise routine that's 5 days a week of strength training for hitting maximal PRs, we have an identity crisis. We want those to harmonize. So when, when high-level athletes, so people who actually earn their living on the football field, on the basketball court, you name it, when they hire me to evaluate their training programs, I'm not looking at them and going back and saying, oh, what are you thinking? What are you new to this? You're doing all the wrong exercises. No, these are great programs that professionals have put together. And I'm looking at them and they're very thoughtful. And sometimes these people are training 12, 14, 18 hours a week. These are pro athletes. I'm always going back to my client with the same feedback. Great exercise. Now we need to get optimal because you have stated this, this, and this are your goals. Now, when I break down your training for the week, I see 2 to 3 hours of training that's directly correlative to those stated priorities. The rest is auxiliary. I want to flip-flop that. I want to make sure that if we draw a pie graph, the bigger piece of that pie graph is all correlating to working towards your stated goal. And it does not mean sacrificing one thing for another. It means picking the order that we're doing things. I get executive type A personalities that call me up. Angelo, I know who you are. I know who you work with. Here's what I want from you. I want to bench 300 pounds. I want to run a sub 6-minute mile. And oh, by the way, I want to lose 30 pounds. And they say, can you get me there? And I say, yes, I can get you there, Johnny. But here's what you have to pick. Which one of those three do you want to do first? Because if we try and do all three of those things at the same time, you're going to accomplish none of them. So that's where the specificity comes in, the appropriate goal setting comes in. And so that was a long-winded way of saying, yes, you need to exercise.
Well, it makes sense how you describe that. I mean, the panorama is, right, there's different types of exercise, but it needs to complement the goal. And if, weight loss is one of those components, that makes sense. Going with goals, Angelo, I'm going to talk about or ask a question that's related to two probably near and dear topics to people's hearts: ice cream and alcohol. And on that note, I wanted to ask, the question was raised, ice cream is one of those foods that can be a nice treat. And if you're on working with MetPro and you're on a phase where ice cream is not on the meal plan, and so it's deferred, and you say, I'm going to get that later, it's almost like a carrot hanging out there. Have you observed that some people will, it will have a negative effect where they have deferred that for so long that they almost binge into that, right? That I've denied myself ice cream for week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, and now week 6. Here I am looking at the bottom of the gallon ice cream container. How do you, I guess with that, how do you protect against that? How do you avoid that situation, very practically, so you don't fall into those habits or patterns?
Yeah, let's talk about practical and real world. So, I mean, obviously, ice cream is never going to help with your weight loss goals. That said, there's a few principles that we can follow here. A client of mine who became a very, very dear friend, I worked with him many, many years. He's a MD, he's a diagnostician, very good one, by the way. He once said to me something very profound. He said, Angelo, I'm in the business of helping people get healthy, but there are few things that human beings derive more pleasure from than good food and drink. And I wholeheartedly believe in that. I mean, there are some people, everybody, there is no right or wrong here, to each their own. But for me personally, if I was doing all this to get in shape, to be healthy, to be fit, it meant that I could never enjoy something that brings me pleasure, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. That said, if we have a goal and then everything goes out the roof, and it's kind of that, there's a lot of programs that emphasize behavioral steps, and those are good, but oftentimes they end up turning into half measures, and then the person has been they're trying to put effort into seeing progress, but they don't want to make themselves too uncomfortable. So what they end up feeling like is they've spent month after month after month, and they look back and they feel like I've been dieting for 6 months without any returns. So the balance to that, the counter argument, is one of my mentors, Michael Daphne. He's a great thought leader. He would explain it this way. He would say, there are few things that motivate humans as much as seeing progress. So if I had to say where we're going to lean as far as a company stance at MetPro, we're going to lean towards, here's what it takes to get progress. Within that, it has to be sustainable. And if you go 6 months without a scoop of ice cream, you're going to crack. You can't do that. So I'll illustrate from a practical standpoint what that means. And I actually use this illustration almost every week in my coaching. I have 2 clients. Client A calls me up. She says, Angelo, I had my meals packed. I had my routine all dialed in. I cooked in bulk macro. I had everything ready to go. I had my breakfast on track, my snacks on track. But after work today, on my way home, I stopped at grandma's house and she just baked this fresh apple pie. I had a piece and I didn't lose any weight. That's client A. Client B. Well, you'll be proud of me. Even though I didn't get any of my meals prepped in advance and I had to wing it today, I managed to make good choices. I managed to stop along the way and get what I needed. I didn't cheat once on my diet today, and I lost a pound. That's client B. This is really important, guys. Client B is useless to me right now. I want you to be client A. I want you to be the apple pie client. Why? Client B has done nothing to impact our ability to make progress long term. Nothing. Client A tells me that she has a routine in place. She has a habit in place. It's on her schedule. She's taking action. She's taking charge of the future. And even though we had a piece of apple pie today, she has all the things we need for the big picture success. Be client A. So that's what I want you to think about. I'll get a client that'll call me up and they'll say, Angelo, I can follow this, but I want you to know on the 27th this month, it's our anniversary. And then I interrupt him. I say, let me stop you right there, Johnny. I don't care. Like, what do you mean you don't care? I don't care. Between now and the 27th, you're literally going to be eating 144 meals. I want you to nail 85% of them. I don't care about that one meal. One meal, one ice cream cone is not going to make or break. Now, if I call you up and I say, hey, Johnny, I got a question for you. Do you have your routine in place? Have you done anything to manage your time for the next 72 hours and ensure that you can follow through with a meal plan, with a routine? If you say no to that, we have some work to do. And I have people asking me this all the time. I mean, medical professionals, pro coaches, people who've been trainers for decades asking me this all the time. What is the secret to transformation success? It's not your diet. It's not your exercise. It is time management. That is the secret. It's time management. You have to have a good base routine, because when you have a base routine, we can build on that and add all the other numbers that we need to make sure that the rest of the pieces to get you progress fall into place.
You know, Angelo, as you said that, I was thinking, there was a quote recently I saw. It was one of the CEOs that we work with described MetPro has a lot of grace to it, right? That there's the, you know, like you said, it doesn't have to be 100%, but there's this baseline of time management, of trying to, you know, consistency over time. And I think that's one of the neat dimensions. It's not a diet plan. There is a lot of grace. I want to propose a question to you, though. Let's say you stop by grandma's house and it's not apple pie. By the way, I love the apple pie client example.
It's something
but
more of a
grandma
beverage
doesn't give
nature.
You an apple pie. Grandma offers you a glass of wine. And so, especially as we come back into, you know, kind of a post-COVID era, I know we're, you know, mingling more. There's more social gatherings. It's summertime, right? Alcohol is just kind of part of many social gatherings. How do you not lose progress, or how do you weave alcohol into a meal plan? I know that it's something that's being tracked and managed, but any kind of wisdom practically how to include alcohol as part of the lifestyle.
So first of all, even taking a step back to the kind of 50,000 foot altitude on that, don't think in terms of a diet plan. What is MetPro? MetPro is a process of evaluation. So don't think, oh, well, I can't have wine while following a MetPro meal plan. That doesn't work. That concept is not true. Now, your body may be in stasis and hit a plateau while following a MetPro meal plan if you're having wine, or it may not. What's going to determine that is if there's contrast. So I've had clients who have been able to have a glass of red wine every night before bed and can still lose weight. But they still lost weight because there was other places in the diet that I was able to consistently create leverage, create contrast, manipulate. So if somebody comes to me and they say, well, Angelo, for breakfast, I have biscuits and gravy. For lunch, I have Taco Bell. And for dinner, I have a big bowl of spaghetti and meatballs and then a glass of wine at night. And they say, can I keep drinking that glass of wine and still lose weight? Yes, you can. Absolutely. Because I got lots of options. Now, if somebody comes to me and says, Angelo, for breakfast, I have some egg whites with a little bit of bell pepper sprinkled in. For lunch, I have a giant salad with chicken on top. And for dinner, I have tofu and grilled broccoli and then a glass of wine at night. Can I lose weight and still have that glass of wine? No, you can't. People tend to overthink it just from a practical standpoint. What's the definition of insanity? Trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. You have to create contrast. And so your coach is going to go after whatever they feel is going to create the biggest contrast. And so if I tell my clients you can never have any alcohol again, I'm going to have none clients left. But usually I can negotiate with them and say, okay, how about we do this? How about we pick the nights of the week and we limit it? Also, there is a significant difference in impact when it comes to type of alcohol. So now here's the part where there's the disclaimer. I'm going to have you all sign the waiver before I tell this to you. This is not a health recommendation. This is a cellulite accumulation to buzz translation chart. So that's what we're talking here, not a health recommendation. It is a truism, however, that hard alcohol is probably going to have the least impact on your weight loss efforts versus coming in first place, the worst of the worst is going to be your mixed drinks. That's kind of the frou-frou drinks, the drinks where you have alcohol mixed in a juice, so you're getting the alcohol and the sugar fruit juices, and then just for good measure, ones that have salt mixed in them to make sure that you wake up retaining water the next morning. That's kind of the ultimate coming into first place of, try to limit your margaritas, your pina coladas, etc. After that is going to be your good old-fashioned beer or wine. Don't get sucked in, wine is healthy. It's good for the heart. It's great for the heart. Absolutely. But as long as you're drinking it at night before bed, it's definitely going to have a profound impact on your body's ability to strip fat, especially in that sleep cycle. So beer and alcohol, champagnes, that's going to come in second. And then your best is going to be either for lack of a better term, your diet beers, your diet alcoholic beverages, and your hard alcohol. Clear hard alcohol, your tequila, your vodka, typically you're going to be able to get away with a little bit more. Again, this isn't don't ask me about your liver panel or what's going to be the best for your health, but as far as strategies for social drinking, that's going to be. Now, I said social because that's usually what triggers the drinking events, is usually social activity, and you're not going to stop being social. So if you think ahead, there's a few little ways to game the system. If you're going to go to someone's house and alcohol is going to be involved, don't guess. Don't leave it to chance. Well, I guess I'm drinking whatever they're making. Bring your host a dinner, a party gift. Bring them a set of shakers and some vodka and a calorie-free beverage. Stack the deck. Think ahead a little. There's little tricks you can do. So travel, bring your own alcohol. So then when everyone's drinking, you have some that's going to be a less detrimental type that you can also share with others. Somebody have a question? I saw someone.
I
Catherine,
did. Hi, this is Catherine. And thank you for the time. And thank you for MetPro, because I'm someone with a challenging metabolism, to say the least. And this is the first time I felt like I had hope.
Woohoo! Oh, I love hearing that. That's wonderful.
So it means a lot. Thank you. And my question is before I kind of went off the rails at Memorial Day, I was at a point when I was thinking about maintenance. And I'm curious for your take on what's the best way to know that I'm at a sustainable point and that I can have those, the alcohol and the apple pie every so often? What does that look like on
Great
MetPro?
question. Okay, so there's two answers to that, Catherine. So first is a strict by the numbers, the metabolic answer. And then there's the who we are at our core as a person, the behavioral answer. So the strict metabolic answer is, and I'm just going to use an example here. Somebody's goal weight is 200 pounds. Johnny wants to weigh 200 pounds. We started at 215. Can he maintain 200? Well, the answer is we needed to actually diet him down to about 195 and then have him gain 5 pounds back. Probably not the answer you're expecting, but I'll explain that. So what triggers weight loss is a deficit in intake, whether it's caloric, macronutrient, carbohydrate, et cetera. There's going to have to be a deficit. When there's a deficit, your metabolic rate is going to slow down. That's right. It doesn't matter how great a diet is. If you're losing weight, your metabolic rate is actually slowing, not speeding at that moment in time. Why? Because your body's prioritizing living. It has to keep you alive, so it knows your base metabolic processes has to acclimate down. So Johnny here, he started at 215. We had him on a mid-intake diet. And so he lost 5-6 pounds, and then his metabolism goes, okay, I'm used to this. And so he adds a little exercise, and he loses another 2 or 3 pounds, and his body goes, okay, I'm used to this. So now we have to lower his intake, and he loses another 4 or 5 pounds, and his body says, I'm used to it. And then we go to the exercise and say, okay, we're going to add a little more exercise, and he loses another 2 or 3 pounds. And we got one more time, and he hits another plateau, and his body goes, okay, I'm used to this, but there's nothing more to take out. So we repeat the cycle. We got to bring his intake back up gradually and then go for round 2. Now in round 2, it's different because round 2, I'm looking for his maintenance weight, or round 3 or 4, whatever. Now I need him to actually be at a point where if he deviates from the diet, Catherine, he pays the calorie cost, not the carbohydrate cost. There's a difference, and it's not fair. So here's what that means. That means that his body is used to a decent caloric intake, and he is not sensitive to carbohydrates, which means I'm going to continue that fat burning cycle, periodization, until he's slightly below his maintenance weight. And then I'm going to force him to gradually eat a little bit more, while putting on muscle as he gains weight up to his maintenance weight. So that way his body is out of that hypersensitive state. Here's why the body's hypersensitive on lower intake levels. When you restrict calories, is pretty obvious. When you restrict calories too far, your metabolic rate slows down. What I want to talk more about is carbohydrates. When you restrict carbohydrates even a little, your body goes through a process where it'll prioritize glycogen replenishment. To illustrate this in brief, pro athletes being coached by professional nutritionists who are preparing them for an endurance event will go through a process called carb loading. Has everybody heard of carb loading? We all know someone who's done that before. We've heard of carb loading. It doesn't work the way you think. Believe it or not, a professional execution of carb loading starts with taking someone and decreasing their carbohydrates. Why? Because even a 20% reduction in what somebody's accustomed to in the way of carbohydrates will create a hypersensitivity in their body, where for about 24 to 36 hours, their body will be able to superimpose more glycogen, that's basically sugar, at the muscle site for, again, about 24 to 46 hours in response to what it perceives as a deficit of that particular component that the body wants. So a professional carb loading cycle goes like this. We're going to decrease your carbohydrates for 48 hours by 20, and then we're going to go back to normal and increase by 25, 30% for another 48 hours prior to a race. That's a canned approach, but that would be what it would potentially look like. That enables the person to show up on the start line with about 10 to 15% more in glycogen reserves. Now, here's why I'm telling this story. Throughout the late 80s, early 90s, and into the 2000s, we have had women and men, but I see this a lot with my female clients in their 40s going to their doctors saying, "Doctor, I don't know why I'm carbohydrate sensitive. Every time I eat carbohydrates, I gain 2 pounds." And the doctor says, "You're right, your body's carb sensitive. So watch your carbs." So they eat less carbs, so they become more carb sensitive. And I'm not saying that carb sensitivity is not a thing. It absolutely is a thing. But it's a individually created scenario, because when you get your body used to very low carbohydrates, and then all of a sudden you have a dinner roll and a glass of wine, you can wake up the next day to an extra 4 pounds of you. That's the carbohydrate cost. There isn't there was not 14,000 calories in the meal you had the night before. There wasn't 14,000 calories. So you're not paying the calorie cost. Once we bring you out of that carbohydrate sensitivity, then when you have a glass of wine and a piece of apple pie, the next day you might be up a little bit, but you won't see these huge swings like the stock market, right? You won't see these massive trends because your body isn't going to be in that hypersensitive state. So that's the scientific answer, is we need to get you to a sustainable, and now there's a whole, that's a whole topic into itself. What is sustainable? Okay, I want to lose more weight. Should you lose more weight? The answer is yes, you can. I'm interested in the weight that you're at because your metabolism is running fast. I don't really care about the weight you can get to by starving yourself, because that's just a temporary number on the scale. The number on the scale is always going to catch up to the overall state of your metabolism. So once we determine a realistic, healthy goal body weight, then we run the numbers, we get you slightly below that, we make sure we bring you through a process in MetPro that we call a metabolic revving cycle or an up adjust cycle. So that way your body is out of this hypersensitive state. And that means from a scientific standpoint, you're in the best possible position to sustain that. Now, from a behavioral, from a psychological standpoint, and I'm no psychologist, but I've been doing this for a couple days. I can tell you, I can see them coming a mile away. I can tell you who is going to maintain and continue their progress and who's going to slide right back to old habits. And I defined it in that statement, habits. If you find that despite adversity and changing circumstances, when the dust settles, you slide back into a good routine, you are there. If you find that when something throws you a curveball, when the dust settles, you slide back into a bad routine, you're not there yet. And that's why I put a lot of emphasis on values over goals. The goal is great. Goals are great for high school reunions and weddings. Those are great for goals. They don't mean much long-term for me. Values are different. Goals are something I put on the calendar. I can hold my breath for 30 days and I can cut out the sugar and I can hit that goal, but I haven't really changed anything. Values are what is important to me in life. And I see the value to the quality of my life, to how I feel, to how I look. There's nothing wrong with that. To who I am as a person with this value set. And so I am going to adopt that. I'm going to plagiarize an example that I heard because I just thought it was so good from a psychologist. He said, think of a value in this way. You're eating at a diner and you sit down, and the couple that got up before you, they left the $10 tip on the table. Your waitress is off in the back and she hasn't come and picked up the tip yet. You take the money. She wouldn't see it. Nobody's going to see it. Do you take that $10? No, of course we don't. The very thought of that is offensive to us. We don't have to sit there and go, man, I really want that $10. What should I do? And fight with ourselves over it. We know we feel good when we eat clean. When we walk by that bakery and we smell those pastries, we're like, oh, Man, the devil and the angel sitting there having that argument going back and forth. The truth is that's never going to go away. Why? Because our body enjoys. Ice cream tastes good. Chocolate's delicious. It's always going to be delicious. What we have to do is we can't battle the fact that chocolate is good. And so we're not trying to live off of chocolate. And now I'm starving and hungry all the time. You're not going to win that battle. It has to be a balance of a value system that says, no, it's not that I'm going to deprive myself from time to time of things that I like. It's that I'm going to go out of my way to fuel my body excellently, day in and day out. So that way, when I do want to indulge, I can do so guilt-free, because my routine is a routine that is promoting my value set. And that's why I like values better than goals.
Hey, Angelo, on the note of goals, I wanted to give an opportunity. Michelle had a question about goals and how that ties in with fitness and meal plans. Michelle, are you able to come off mute and ask that question? Just give her 1 second. I know Michelle's in a busy area right at the moment.
No worries. Yeah, these are great questions, guys.
Well, Michelle, I'll just pose the question. If you can chime in, you can follow up with what I'll say. Michelle was asking, does MetPro have specific personalized training regimens to complement the meal plans? For instance, you're training for a marathon, but would rather lose as much weight as you can before the race, as opposed to focusing on a time goal. Is there then a personalized training program to go with the meal plan, or are you on your own for training and the meal plan is adjusted based off the training you choose? The app, and this is for concierge, has workouts, but they aren't personalized based on meal plans.
I did. Hey, I'm so sorry. I tried to get off mute, and then it ended the whole thing for me.
Oh no. Well, so I just phrased your question, but Michelle, I posed that to Angelo. Did you want to provide any color commentary to what I just said?
Oh, no, I actually missed what you just said, because when I tried to unmute my microphone, it just turned off the app for me. I'm so sorry. My kitty went in the ER today, and I went out to dinner instead. So I'm so sorry.
It sounds like your question is about training for a marathon and having fitness kind of correlate with the meal plans. Is that right?
Yes. So I started MetPro last August, and I love it. I've dropped close to 40 pounds. It's wonderful. My blood sugar has gone down, like everything. My whole life has turned around, and I feel fantastic. But we got into the lottery for the Berlin Marathon in September, and if all goes to plan with COVID and everything, we'll be running it. And my goal is more weight loss centric than it is a time goal. Like, I'll finish it. I don't really care if I PR or anything. I'd rather drop the last 30 pounds that I need. So is there a specific training plan, I guess, that so you'd mentioned, like, you want to hit all the levers and make sure the pie chart is actually where it should be? Like, my goal is to finish the marathon in 6 hours or less, and I can do that, but I want to lose the weight along the way. So is there more than just what the app has to offer, a more personalized training program for the cutting cycles and the up adjusts? Yes. Or is it just kind of like, I run my marathon training plan that I pulled off the MTA website, which thankful for MTA and thankful for you, and then like go in and just adjust my meal plan accordingly?
No, so you kind of answer. So the key with this scenario is to decide what your priority is. And as it sounds like you've already determined, you can't maximize both. So if you're focusing on fat burning as your priority over any sort of marathon time, then what you're going to do, now barring maybe the week leading up or couple weeks leading up to it, then what you're going to do is stay on track with your coach, with your meal plan, and adjust to the degree available, adjust your training intensity to match your intake instead of adjusting your intake to match your training intensity. So that's the difference. So if you want fat loss to be number one, though, if you're going to run a full marathon, then you're going to have to kind of put that aside for at least some amount of time leading up to the race. But that doesn't mean you have to do that for the next several months. It is okay if you train for it at a moderate pace, talk with your coach about it. Let's individualize your training to meet your number one priority of fat loss first, and we'll scale your training around that. Now, a lot of people, though, what they want to do is there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, let's prioritize hitting a PR, or for some people, just being able to finish a marathon is a very stretch athletic goal in of itself. If that's the case, there is nothing wrong with still continuing to push for some weight loss. But at the end of the day, your training is going to be in place and your diet is going to adapt to your training needs first and foremost, above any fat loss needs. And so that's where having a strategy, there's no right or wrong. It's a matter of what works for you and saying, okay, on the calendar, I have this race coming up in September or whenever it is. And so what I want to do is I want to focus on fueling for this, hitting PRs, pushing the limits, making sure I have ample fuel, knowing that, no, it won't be optimal for fat loss, but you will still make some progress along the way. And then right after that event, your metabolic rate is going to be through the roof because you've been eating more and you've been training for a marathon. Then when you switch to a fat burning cycle, it'll be very, very effective. But for the nuances of how you can train, we can absolutely help you with that. What you have to decide, Michelle, first is just what's your priority hierarchy, and then your training will match that. I do recommend some running in there, of course. Angie and Trevor at MTA are fabulous, and they'll keep you motivated for that. But you can also have some accessory training that's in those other fitness categories as well. And your coach can help you with that. I can help you with that. We'll make sure you get that all sorted so you're dialed in for your race.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Awesome. Well, we are approaching the end of our time for this webinar. This was great, Angelo. Thanks for all the information, and thanks for everyone who asked questions either beforehand or during. This is fascinating stuff. And you know, this is a transformation journey, right? Lots of questions unanswered, I'm sure. If you have any follow-up questions or things that didn't quite get squared away, you just send those to us. You know, you've got the email from the invite, Ask a Coach. You can certainly reach out to me at tom@metpro.co. We'll be having this, and there'll be a follow-up email with a webinar invite and a recording afterwards. And thank you all for participating today, and looking forward to connecting at the next webinar. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.